Welcome to meeting number 68 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. For the first hour, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Monday, October 3rd, 2022, the committee is resuming its study on the experience of women's veterans. And for the second hour, we will discuss it will be the National Monument of Canada's mission in Afghanistan. Permettez-moi de saluer quelques remplaçants.
Allow me to introduce some people who are replacing members on the committee today. We have Karine Grandjean, who is acting as acting clerk, and Ms. Diana Ambrosa, who is an analyst. There we go. According to the procedure, please wait before I call your name. I must say that the connection tests were done in compliance with the rules. And although this room is equipped with a high-performance audio system, feedback can occur. Feedback can be extremely harmful to the interpreters and cause serious injury. The most common cause of feedback is an earpiece worn too close to a microphone. We therefore ask all participants to exercise extreme caution when handling earpieces. In order to prevent incidents and safeguard the hearing health of the interpreters, I would invite participants to ensure that they're speaking into their assigned microphone and to avoid handling the earpieces. Pursuant to the motion on the experience of women veteran, we have a trigger warning that is the following. Before we welcome our witnesses, I would like to provide this trigger warning. We will be discussing experiences related to mental health. This can be triggering to people here with us in the room, viewers, or staff with similar experiences. If you feel distressed or need help, please advise the clerk.
Witnesses, I would like to provide this trigger warning. We may be discussing experiences related to general health and mental health. This may triggering to viewers, members, or staff with similar experiences. If you feel distressed or need help, please advise the clerk. J'aimerais donc maintenant.
I would like to welcome our guests today.
The first hour are, as individual, we have Mrs. Chris Edwards, researcher, Mrs. Mélanie Morin-Pelletier, historian from the Canadian War Museum, and from Veterans Emergency Transition Services, Mrs. Debbie Lauder, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder by video conference. Excuse me. So now we're going to start with the opening statement, and I'd like to invite Mrs. Mélanie Morin-Pelletier. You have 5 minutes for your opening statement. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, for inviting me to contribute to this important study. You have had the privilege of listening to many testimonials from women veterans who have bravely shared parts of their experiences. As a military historian, my contribution is a humble summary of over 20 years of research into the lives and experiences of veterans of the 2 world wars. Examining the historical context in which these pioneers' military service took place helps us to better grasp the rest of the story. We quickly realize that the challenges faced by these women in the socio-military structures of the time have persisted for quite some time and continue to do so. This is true also for the barriers, preconceptions, discrimination, and prejudice against them. Until 1941, the only title a woman could hold in the Canadian Army was that of nursing sister. There were 2,845 nursing sisters who served in France, Belgium, England, and even in Greece and Russia during World War I. At least 60 of them died from injury or disease. Their title was militarily equivalent to the rank of lieutenant. That gave them some authority over their patients in the hospitals, but not over the men outside. So as you can imagine, this could cause confusion. As officers, they were forbidden to fraternize with soldiers outside the hospitals. This was one of the ways of protecting their public morality. They were also ordered to wear a uniform that had a long blue dress and a white veil. This was similar to what nuns wore at the time. They were portrayed in the media of the time as white angels, universal mothers, and their behavior was expected to reflect these stereotypical images. Regulations required women to be single at the time of enlistment. There were a few exceptions of married women or widows, but they could not have any dependents. Until 1943, those who married were discharged. Until the 1970s, marriage and motherhood were seen as major inconveniences by the Army and valid reasons for relieving women of their duties. These pioneers who wanted to serve in both world wars, and I must say, there were always more women who volunteered for the positions than there were positions available. The main reasons they gave for enlisting was to serve their country and to help win the war. These women had to go through all sorts of problems in a political, socio-military system that considered their presence tolerable for the duration of the war, but largely undesirable. Even during World War II, when over 50,000 Canadian women were in uniform and majoritarily served within the country, the Army continued to portray their contribution as an emergency measure in order to free up men for combat. As you may know, women were barred from combat positions until the end of the 80s. The popular expression of the time was that they were the girls behind the boys behind the guns. They were not employed, and their enlistment did not stem from a right or from a need to work that would follow the Great Depression, but truly it was in the name of an urgent, exceptional, and temporary situation. This insistence that they were transient guests had a significant impact on how they were treated at the end of the world wars as women veterans. Veteran nurses, for example, were expected to return to work as quickly as possible in the national healthcare system, and yet many of those women had not been doing that kind of work for more than 4 years. Women veterans who had served in other jobs during World War II were also expected to make marriage their preferred career option. In addition, measures were also put in place to ensure that they did not compete with men veterans who were expected to have priority over jobs. In conclusion, this very succinct overview argues that the socio-military context women veterans were subjected to, which also included the hyper-masculine culture of the warrior, has marginalized women and minimized, unfortunately, over 100 years of women's contribution to the war effort in Canada and to Canadian military history. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Morin-Pelletier, for that information, that historical background that you've presented today. Thank you.
To invite Mrs. Chris Edwards for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today. This is a very important subject area for me, so I'm very grateful. I'll be speaking to you today as a researcher and a civilian who supports members of the Canadian Armed Forces, our first responders, and veterans. My research focus at this time is how biological sex, reproductive health, and occupation are related to musculoskeletal injuries. I will likely be referring to musculoskeletal injuries as MSKI because it's a lot easier to say. Women have been serving in Canada for over 100 years, and this is in both military and RCMP contexts. Research, training, infrastructure, equipment, and resources for both serving and retired female members do not reflect this. In fact, when I conducted my first literature review in 2018 to build evidence-based rehabilitation and physical training programs for the CAF members that I was supporting, there wasn't a single study published on the common injuries among Canadian servicewomen. As a world leader for the integration of women into careers that are historically only open to men, we need to do better. And what do I mean by do better? I'm now going to share, with permission from the sources, some examples and quotes from female members. The sexism that is systematically built into our medical care also makes it so that any female-specific medical issues aren't taken seriously. I also hear that that's just healthcare in general, though, so I guess it doesn't matter if it's documented, it won't really help. I had my breasts basically removed to fit my kit. Yes, having a surgically modified chest designed specifically to be flatter has helped me better fit my kit. And that's super messed up because women shouldn't have to cut their boobs off to be able to do basic military tasks without the injury risks by just wearing their kit they're forced to wear. I went in with bad cramping and asked to have my IUD removed. They wouldn't look at me because I was being posted out soon, and they said just to do it when I get to my next posting. When I got there, it took 8 months before someone would take out my IUD, and they just gave me naproxen. They offered me more drugs, but I just wanted the thing out because I'm pretty sure it wasn't put in the first place. This experience has stopped me from going to the MIR when needed. I would rather pay out of pocket to be taken seriously. I am avoiding putting my claims in through VAC because they're notoriously horrible to deal with, and I don't have the bandwidth to do that on top of everything else. No woman I know wears the front plate. I end up just wearing 2 back plates in my frag vest because at least it kind of fits. And I'm now going to speak to the research that I've been a part of at the Adamo Lab at the University of Ottawa. Females serving in the CAF experience higher rate of pelvic floor dysfunction when compared to the civilian population. Female CAF members experience higher rates of overuse injuries when compared to their male colleagues. Female members experience higher rate of injuries during their annual physical force test compared to their male colleagues. Female members who have given birth are more likely to sustain overuse injuries than the nulliparous peers, and also males. And only 6.7% of CAF members who have been pregnant while serving received specialized physical training support. That's 6.7%. To conclude, Canada has taken a gender-neutral and female-inclusive approach. Unfortunately, evidence-based gender-neutral means man because the lack of women representation in research. Until the physiology, biomechanics, and anatomy of females are included in the CAF Health Services training courses, prioritized in research, and are required to be supported by the defense team, the needs of female CAF members and veterans will not be understood, and they will continue to be invisible.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Edwards. And now I'd like to invite from Veterans Emergency Transition Services, Mrs. Debbie Lotter, to open the mic and to start. You will have 5 minutes. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today as you undertake this very important study on the experience of women veterans. Honestly, I find it disheartening that in 2023, there is an overwhelming need to even have this conversation. As a national registered charity with an aim to provide immediate on-the-ground support to Canadian Armed Forces and RCMP veterans who are homeless, at risk of becoming homeless, or otherwise in crisis, Vets Canada has had the privilege to interact with thousands of veterans since our inception in 2010. According to figures based on the 2021 Statistics Canada census, women represented 16.2% of veterans, but women currently account for just over 19% of our caseload. Because of this, we are in a position to have many experiences shared with us. The stories we hear are all unique, but there are many common themes. First of all, almost every female veteran we have worked with has disclosed having experienced military sexual trauma and sexual harassment. The other common themes we hear are that women veterans feel invisible, they feel a strong sense of betrayal, and they feel more judged by VAC than their male colleagues. We have many women veterans who tell us that by the time they released from the Canadian Armed Forces, they were so physically and mentally exhausted from working twice as hard to earn half the respect as their male counterparts received, that they didn't have the capacity or to effectively manage their own lives, and they completely fell apart. Many women veterans have told us that their time in the CAF wounded them, and then they went to VAC only to have salt added to the wounds. We hear from numerous male veterans that their erectile dysfunction is an approved pensioned condition through VAC, but then we have women veterans who tell us that they experience sexual dysfunction but have been regularly denied any recognition of their condition. Some women veterans have told us that when they are discussing their situations or their symptoms with healthcare providers or VAC case managers, they've been told it's all in your head or you're being dramatic. We have never had a single male veteran tell us that they have been called dramatic. If we could provide any recommendations to improve the experiences of women veterans, a couple would be as follows. The first recommendation is for the CAF, not VAC, but they say prevention is the best medicine. So if there is a segment of training included in basic training around what constitutes sexual misconduct or sexual harassment, just maybe we could prevent some of the military sexual trauma. I realize that we shouldn't have to train people to be decent human beings, but sadly, it seems that we do. Next, there are 6 ministerial advisory groups, but none specific to women veterans, and there should be. I think it's important for VAC to listen to women veterans, but a good representation of women veterans. Last year, VAC held a Women and 2S LGBTQI+ Veterans Forum, which consisted of a series of panel discussions. There were 11 veterans and currently serving CAF members on the various panels. One was a retired sergeant and one was a retired master corporal. The rest were all officers. I don't think that was a realistic representation of women veterans' voices. And finally, this just hit me last week as I was preparing a report for VAC as a requirement of our funding from the Veteran and Family Wellbeing Fund. There's a question in the report, as there was in the original application for funding, around GBA+. And when I got to that question, I thought, with all of the inconsistencies and deficiencies in the experiences of women veterans, maybe VAC needs to apply a GBA+ lens to their own policies and programs. Thank you all for listening. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lotter. And now we're going to start the first round of questions. And I'm pleased to invite Mrs. Wagenthal for 6 minutes, please. Mrs. Wagenthal.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you all for being here today. And I know that what we're hearing today is going to make a big difference to the study. I'm going to begin with our friend Deb Lowther with Vets Canada. Thank you for all the work that you've done since 2010. And I note that you began as a service for those that were homeless, and since then have expanded, Deb, into helping those in financial need or mental health crisis. And I, specifically in regard to women, but also in general, those two areas of need, have you found that they play a role in homelessness? or is it, is it the chicken before the egg, or which? What have you learned since taking on those areas as well?
Well, we've learned that there's a lot of circumstances that lead to homelessness. Financial need being one of them, but we do support veterans who are not homeless, but are could possibly be on the trajectory to become homeless because of financial crisis. A lot of mental health issues have led veterans to need our support, mental health and addictions, and those are almost always related to their service. We've also, in the last little while, started supporting a number of still serving members as we see rising prices of everything. Everybody seems to be struggling, so we're trying to help as many people as we can.
Sure, thank you. Can you tell me how many are women? What's the ratio, or what have you found in the past while, as there's a little bit more recognition of the fact that our women veterans are suffering, and in many ways suffering in ways we hear today, of course, that are contrary to what other veterans may suffer.
Right. So we actually see about almost 20% of the veterans that are coming to us looking for support are women. That's been an increase over the last couple of years. I would say probably about 7 or 8 years ago, we were only at about 13% of female veterans on our caseload, and now we're between 19 and 20%. They deal with a lot of other challenges that male veterans don't face. They've dealt with, a lot of them are fleeing domestic violence. Situations that we see are, most of them have children with them. So they're more apt to come forward and not stay in shelters and, sleep rough because they have children. So they're more likely to come forward and ask for help.
Ms. Edwards, I would like to ask you a question, that probably some of my colleagues wouldn't necessarily know the answer to. You talk about overuse injuries. Can you define that for us, please?
So often when we're looking at musculoskeletal injuries, we classify them in 2 different ways. So we have an acute injury. There's a clear mechanism. You fall off a curb, you break your ankle. We know what happened. Overuse injuries are the accumulation of microtraumas over time. So something that's common in the news right now is MTBI, mild traumatic brain injury. It's subconcussive trauma over time. Stress fractures would be an example of that. Tendinitis, bursitis, those types of injuries are what I'm talking about.
Okay, thank you very much. So that is an issue that we're finding. Of course, a lot of times what CAF responds to or VAC responds to is more of the critical incident injuries. But can you speak just a little bit more to the importance of recognizing, especially in women, and the challenges that they're facing of these repetitive tasks or circumstances where they find themselves being injured on a long-term basis, harder to deal with?
Yeah, so I'll start with overuse injuries are preventable. By definition, they occur over time. So there are many time points where we can intervene and stop these from becoming a really big issue. They impact females at a greater rate than they do males. In the Canadian Armed Forces, 76% of females compared to just around 70% of males, which doesn't seem that big, but when you break it down into occupational role, that disparity actually expands. It's yes. And for females, everything that they do isn't designed for them. Right? We have this in other contexts as well. A female interacting with a keyboard is designed for a man's hands. So we have to stretch. A female's more likely to get carpal tunnel in a non-military context.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that response. Yeah. I just have a short minute left. Ms. Pelletier, I wanted to just ask very briefly, how do you determine, or who determines what you study in regard to those often being overlooked by history?
Can you repeat that question?
I'm sorry. So how is it that you determine what you're going to study and write about?
Okay. At the War Museum?
You can use French if that's more comfortable for you. I can take the interpretation, whichever.
At the War Museum, it's I'm a trained historian in women's history, so I came with that passion. I started studying military nursing 20 years, or more than 20 years ago. So I brought that expertise with me, and now my mission is to give these women a voice that they didn't necessarily had in traditional military history, and I'm very lucky to be able to do that at the War Museum.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Morgenthau. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Miao for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all witnesses online and here joining us today, including all the guests. First, through the chair, I'd like to direct my first question to Ms. Edwards. Thank you for being here. And in your research, you have been particularly interested in how childbirth and occupational roles influence injury risks in service members. We have heard from previous witnesses talking about the need to have more research about women in CAF and women veterans. Can you please share with us about your research on that particular topic, and what could we do to influence how women veterans should be treated?
First of all, we're navigating systems that haven't been built to support a female through their lifespan in a career in the CAF, right? So female reproduction wasn't considered in the medical system when we stood it up, and it's not captured in the supports that we have. So again, the 6.7% of CAF members who have received physical training support during or after pregnancy, so that includes through a pregnancy and the postpartum period, they have they can take a year to 18 months if they want after childbirth, but it's really up to them when they return back to duty. They have to complete their force test, which is their physical fitness standard, to be able to DAG green, which means that they're able to deploy. After pregnancy, we notice that there's a decrease in physical fitness. So we need to take a time, just like you would after an injury, to rehabilitate your body to be able to, again, perform the tasks to the same capacity that you would before. So we have these females who are preparing for their force test. Then they also have to be adapting to their life demands that have changed, and realistically, they are the primary, most of the time, they're the primary parent providing services to their kids, right? And if you're in a dual service relationship, your partner is probably gone. So you're having to prepare yourself physically for a test that may or may not pertain to the duties in your job. You have to then also prepare for the tasks of your job. Also, without doing this with specialized support. Most of these females have never gone through a kinesiology or physiologist training program, so it's a very unrealistic expectation. Their medical support don't have women's health training. So when you go to your medic and you're explaining, I kind of pee myself whenever I'm running. Is this normal? And they're like, yes. But they've never actually gone through training to understand that after 6 weeks, if we gradually return someone to run program and provide pelvic floor physio, urinary incontinence is not actually a normal thing. It's a common experience postpartum, but it's not normal. So we don't have medical support that can ask appropriate questions. I'm getting a little off track here, but I'm talking about physical demands for occupation as well. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And how can we do to influence how women veterans should be treated? How
would this influence women veterans?
Yeah.
Imagine showing up at your doctor with a problem that you think is a problem. So again, urinary incontinence is a great example. And they go, yeah, everyone's got it. And you're like, okay. I guess I've got to wear a diaper to work because I run and I have to go in trenches and carrying a rucksack, which exacerbates pelvic dysfunction. And then you go in and you go, I've got back pain, and it wasn't there before my pregnancy. And again, the medic's like, yeah, everyone's got back pain. And eventually, to what end? Do you just keep going back and being told that your experience doesn't matter? I'm not going to be able to help you because everyone's got it, deal with it? Or being dismissed and feeling invalidated in your experience. And if I had to go to work every day and I was peeing myself every day, I wouldn't really want to be there either. I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but and if there are alternatives and there are supports that exist for civilians, why can't I have access to that?
Well, in your opinion, what is research lacking in order to better help our women veterans right now, and especially when they're medically released?
Yeah, so there's actually very little on Canadians. Right now, typically, there's a few things. Veterans Affairs uses a different classification system for diagnosing than the International Classification of Disease, which is what's used by our healthcare system in Canada, but also in the CAF. And so that alone makes it challenging when we're talking about any issue, regardless if it's women's health related or not. And then when we get into women's health definitions, we're working with a medical system that doesn't have women's health specific training. And then it's being interpreted by someone who works at VAC who doesn't have health background. And they're using a different definition classification. So even that alone, before we even start researching, there's existing definitions that we need to line up. And then we need to understand what is actually happening in our females in the military and also RCMP, right? Because they're actually not the same. Their job demands are quite different and their supports that they have access to are quite different. So we need to understand what injuries are happening, what physical health conditions exist for both military and RCMP, and then we can build systems to support that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Miao. Et maintenant, je reconnais le député.
Now I'd recognize Member Luc Désier for the next 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being with us here this evening. Good evening, fellow colleagues. My first question is for you, Ms. Edwards. We often hear, in fact, for 4 years, we've been hearing about equipment problems for women veterans. But now you are saying that women are surgically removing their breasts. Is that something that happens frequently? Is this something that has happened more recently? Since when have women been doing this?
Because we haven't been asking these questions and we haven't been tracking these, I can't give you a number. But what I do know is I know a number, and those are just from people that I've spoken with, which I'm one person who have had this surgery. So they can do their job. We don't ask about breast injuries in basic training. We don't ask about breast injuries when you go to your medic. In sport, we do. We've started to. And the bruising, the ischemia, so the lack of blood flow to the area actually causing tissue death, it's way more common than you would think. Or maybe if you put on one of these vests, you would understand. So I can't give you numbers, but it's alarmingly common among the people that I support. And again, I'm just one person, and I've only lived in Ontario and New Brunswick. I've only supported the bases there, so it's
très courant.
It happens very often, you said.
That we are allowing females to surgically alter their body to fit into a piece of kit when we actually have female-specific alternatives on the market. Other nations are buying them. I'm passionate about it, obviously, but it doesn't make sense. Imagine going to work and having to wear like women's pants that were made for women or females, and you got the largest size, but it still doesn't fit really well. Would we accept you altering your anatomy for that? But that's what we do.
Regardez, je suis simplement estomaqué.
I am shocked, beyond shocked. I thought that there were equipment. I didn't know that the equipment problems could go to that point. You said that there were alternatives What kind of alternatives are out there? Are there different vests out in the market? Can they be adjusted? Do these exist? Is the department working on that?
We have a team that is tasked to this, and they are taking a female inclusive approach. I'm not really sure what that means, but they are not looking at female specific vests, and we don't have female specific rucksacks either. So a female's frame, their shoulders are narrower than a male's. So their straps should be narrower. And right now, the rucksacks that we have available are designed for a male frame, so they're actually going to sit wider. So imagine having to wear 80 pounds on your back in the position that isn't ideal for you, which pushes your head forward, so you get additional stress on your cervical spine. And then you have a ballistic vest that is not designed to accommodate breasts, and usually it doesn't fit because they only had mediums, and you're an extra small, but you know, you're a small target, which is actually a quote that was sold to one of my friends who was on deployment in an active combat zone. They didn't have a ballistic plates for her that fit, and the comment that was told to her was, "It's a good thing you're small target."
Mais est-ce que ça va jusqu'à...
But are doctors? Is this what is suggested by doctors in the army, in the armed forces? Are doctors even suggesting to women to surgically remove their breasts?
So it's a medical issue. If you have repeated trauma to the breast, and that's what the alternative they can give you, eventually, that's the alternative.
L'alternative qu'un médecin...
The alternative that a doctor in the army would give you, that is what it is?
This is paid for by the CAF, yeah.
Attendez, puis vous voulez dire que...
And what you're saying is that the operation is paid for by CAF?
I'm not sure that... so you're wondering if medical services are paying for these operations? Well, it's through the CAF Health Services. But again, they're not paying it for out of pocket. If that's the alternative that you're asking, yeah.
Non, je comprends que payer... Ben.
I imagine it could be paid out of pocket for some women in some situations, but in cases like this, it's paid by FAC. I understand, by CAF. I would like to hear you talk more about these troubling details today. I know that you're putting your earpiece on right now. This is very troubling for me. We've seen in the past situations where military doctors do not have the same status, rather, as a civilian doctor. I would say that we even heard testimony here where doctors' notes from civilian doctors were not followed by doctors in the Army. Do you agree with that? Does that convey your expectations?
In 15 seconds, please.
I actually have a quote. One day in 2016, I started experiencing mild discomfort in my left rib cage. At first, I didn't think much of it, but I started having shortness of breath, so I followed up and went to the MIR. I had severe chest pain. During my intake, the medical staff reviewed, skipped a lot of this, a few days passed, started feeling even more ill, left arm pain, and the pain in my chest was more intense. Fast forward 3 days later. At this point, I must have looked like hell because I went up to the counter in tears and said I couldn't breathe. They finally took me seriously, and I went for blood work, x-rays, and an ultrasound. My blood work must have tipped them off for something, and they sent me to Fredericton Hospital, where I received a CAT scan and MRI. I deteriorated overnight, and they told me that if it did get worse, to go to the emergency room. I eventually went to the emergency room, where I was immediately admitted to ICU, and they diagnosed me with a pulmonary embolism. It was my first major experience with the medical care system outside of routine medical checks. To this day, I have minimal faith in the care provided to me by military members.
Thank you very much. Merci, Monsieur Desilets. And now I invite Ms. Blenny for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you for everyone to be here testifying. And it's heartbreaking to hear again and again how invisible women who serve us and become veterans are. And today it's just even clearer. So, Ms. Edwards, if I could come to you first. You said in your statement that 6.7% of CAF members who have been pregnant while serving have received specialized physical training, have not received specialized physical, or have received it, meaning a large amount have not. And you expressed shock at this. Can you explain why you were shocked? And I hope you can tie it into your earlier questioning about peeing yourself. And I'm just wondering if you can clarify, is there specific interventions, health interventions, that could help with this for serving members? And how is this documented so that it can be understood when women become veterans?
Okay, you'll probably have to ask me that second part again.
Okay.
But the first part, so why was it shocking that only 6.7% received specialized exercise support? The Canadian exercise guidelines during pregnancy, or guidelines for physical activity, came out, and that was a first in the world. And actually, our physical activity guidelines during pregnancy have been adopted by a number of countries. And so as leaders, you would expect that that would be adopted by our military because, just makes sense. We recommend that it's 150 minutes per week for a pregnant woman to exercise. 50% didn't have modifications to their PT, they just continued on. And 27.6% stopped their physical training altogether. So no wonder they're having issues returning to duty afterwards and meeting the physical fitness standard if we're not actually supporting them through pregnancy. A number of females in Canada, there's actually just a study out of the University of Alberta, lifting up to 80% of their repetition max. They've obviously been training before pregnancy, but they can continue lifting through. And especially when you have a physical employment standard that you have to achieve, and you have a health services system that is supposed to support you through this process, the fact that only 6.7% received support is very disappointing. When I was doing this analysis, actually, there was over 90% wanted support and would have taken support if they'd had it. And to be fair, there are initiatives that have been started to address this issue. But when we're talking about veterans, we can't look at what's happening now. We have to look at the systems that were in place while they were serving and how those systems are affecting their physical health now. To talk about the urinary incontinence and pelvic floor, there are a number of different things we can do. There's pelvic floor physio, which is quite common, and you don't just have to have had a baby to need or a benefit from pelvic floor physio, but this does treat and greatly reduce the symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction, whether it be pelvic organ prolapse, fecal incontinence, or urinary incontinence. And you can do those during pregnancy, and after childbirth, it also assists.
And so my next part of that question is that being properly documented so that when they become veterans, they can claim on that?
We don't have women's health training. So if you don't know to ask the question, why would you ask the question?
Yeah. And so that leads me to another question about your perspectives on the disconnect between CAF and VAC terminology for diagnoses.
Yeah. So if you look just at pelvic floor, there is actually a category on the VAC checklist. This document is massive, but they have tables of criteria of do you fit this, do you fit this, but I don't know anyone who's actually successfully put in a claim for this. And the reason being is we only, research from the Adama Lab just got published in the last year on the pelvic floor dysfunction in the Canadian Armed Forces members. If you're a non-commissioned member, so if you work as a vehicle tech, for example, you're in and out of your vehicle quite a bit, they're at a greater risk of sustaining or experiencing pelvic floor dysfunction, regardless of parity status, so regardless if they've had a baby or not. And then if they have had a baby, their likelihood of experiencing at least urinary incontinence is pretty high. If you're relying on data and research to make these case claims, we haven't had any. And if you look at other nations, the argument could be made, well, it's another country, their occupational demands are different. So, and which is either there's no research done and that's the excuse that's been given, or it's, well, it hasn't been done on Canadians, but it's been done by them and it might be the same, but not. So.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bliney. And we have 1 hour with the witnesses, but the last round, I'm going to have to cut a little bit. It's going to be 4 minutes, and 2 minutes for both of you. So I'm going to start with Mr. Blake Richards for 4 minutes, please.
So we've heard a lot of very shocking things today, and I really appreciate, Ms. Edwards in particular, you have brought us a lot of really valuable information, including this idea that, you know, women are actually going and altering their bodies rather than calf altering the equipment that they need. Some of these things are incredibly shocking. I don't know that I have any additional questions because I think you've been able to address all the questions I had very well, but I really want to thank you for those immense and incredibly valuable contributions. There was something else that we heard today that I do want to follow up on, and that was from you, Ms. Lowther. You talked about, due to the rising prices of everything, that current members of our armed forces are coming to you for your assistance. So just to make sure I'm absolutely clear on this, because I find this incredibly shocking, you're telling me that inflation is so bad in Canada that active current members of our Canadian Armed Forces cannot afford the cost of living and are having to come to you for help.
That is correct. And I can also tell you that we have active, currently serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces living in cars. The housing crisis is such that we have, over the past year, seen 3 veterans who have been posted to areas where they cannot afford housing and are living in their cars. So getting ready for work in the morning, putting their uniform on, and going to work in Canadian Armed Forces. So yes, that is in fact very real.
Wow. Yeah, things are incredibly bad. Our housing crisis and our inflation crisis are horrible in this country when it comes to the point where we have sitting members of our armed forces that are you know, in those kinds of predicaments. You know, not to mention the thousands and thousands of other Canadians. Thank you for sharing that with us. And can you maybe tell us a little bit about some of the services that you're providing to our current members as a result?
Yep. So we would help with, you know, for currently serving members, the ones that we have found living in their cars, we've helped them with temporary accommodations, put them in hotels, and then helped with, you know, finding affordable housing. You know, we would assign a volunteer to help them, you know, kind of diligently look for housing. I mean, housing is out there if you have the time to look for it. It's difficult. But so we would help with things like that, help with food, help with gas cards for transportation, those sorts of things. So that would be for like the serving members living in their cars. Other than that, other veterans, we would help with rent to prevent evictions, groceries, clothing, utilities, those sorts of things. Anything that we can do to, you know, prevent somebody from losing their housing.
Well, it's horrible that it's at the point where that those services are needed, but thank you for being there for them. I'm going to just turn the little bit of remaining time I have over to Mr. Dowdall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 1 minute quickly. Thank you, witnesses, for being here today. And just a quick shout out to Ms. Edwards. I hear you won the Tenacious Award, which was the Sir Frederick Banting Award. So congratulations. That's his birthplace is my riding. And I was there. It was his 100th anniversary for the Nobel Prize a couple weeks ago. So congratulations on that. I guess my question to you quickly is about, we're hearing a lot about this overuse injuries for a lot of the females that have been in the CAF. Do you think it would be beneficial to perhaps adopt a presumptive injury list? I know that insurance companies are a pain. I'm dealing with one myself right now, where women veterans can automatically be approved for certain disability claims. So just your thoughts and comments on that and what you think.
I think it's a great idea. I also think that it would be great to know what injuries are actually impacting our members. We don't have an injury surveillance system.
So we have a lot more work to do, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that good?
Thank you very much, Mr. Dorville. And now for 4 minutes, I'd like to invite Caroline Bennett for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you all. I think we heard from you, Ms. Lowther, that it would be advantageous for the minister to have an advisory committee for women veterans, in that I think that we're all a bit shocked about what we've heard today. And I guess a lot of also what Ms. Lowther said is that the prevention is the important part, and I think we all agree that somehow the treatment that's happening in CAF is then not really understood what's being missed when they get to be a veteran. Is that sort of, and so, I mean, I like the idea of Mr. Dowdall around a presumptive diagnosis, because you said that sexism was built into our medical care, and also that no one was trained in women's health, which means nobody knows how to take out an IUD. Oh my word! Anyway, if the questions aren't asked when someone's a CAF member, then it isn't documented, and if it's not documented, then they get turned down by VAC. Is that what you're saying? So. Moving to a presumptive diagnosis, and particularly I was interested in that what is the difference between female specific or female inclusive? If the rucksack should be here in a woman and you're getting neck injuries that because it was here, like there are certain things that now you've got the research saying that should be automatic.
Well, I would say that we've started. For an injury surveillance system, you need to identify what problems exist, and then you need to identify who is actually experiencing those problems, so who is the most vulnerable, and then you can start to break it down to, okay, what's actually causing these injuries, but we haven't done that, so.
And on the issue of mental health, I mean, certainly in my practice, we found that in labor and delivery, sometimes it is when you find out that somebody was previously sexually abused or that there was PTSD. In our interest in having a perinatal mental health strategy, can you tell me what a little bit your research is showing on the link between sexual trauma, pregnancy, perinatal mental health?
Yeah, so I'm a physiologist, so I study the physical body. I'm not a psychologist. Some of my research has looked at the relationship between postpartum depression and injury risk, and there is a relationship between postpartum depression and increased susceptibility to overuse injury. We also see miscarriage as well, and an increased susceptibility to MSKI. And I do think it's a great idea, actually, to have mental health support and physical health support simultaneously through pregnancy and the postpartum period, so that we can actually identify MST is important there, and also postpartum depression. If we don't have practitioners that are specialized in women's health, they're not going to ask, or they think it's normal. And postpartum depression, while it's common, again, it's not normal. And there's a lot of support and a lot of evidence-based practice that can support females through that and women through that. But again, if you don't ask, and
strategy or the perinatal mental health strategy for Canada, you would want to make sure that the experience of CAF members and veterans was part of that mental health, perinatal mental health strategy.
They're Canadians.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it sounds like invisible from what you've been saying today. Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
We've left them behind.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Et maintenant, pour 2 minutes.
Now, for 2 minutes, Mr. Luc Desilets, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Edwards, once again, there's not a lot of statistics out there on health problems experienced by women veterans. I am still shocked of what you said earlier. What would be the organization that should be responsible for studying this issue? It would be good to know how many women. Are you the only one? Are there hundreds? How many? Who should be undertaking the study of this phenomenon?
Came through, but I think I got what you were saying. You're wondering who should be responsible for researching the physical health of veterans, of women veterans? And if that is the case, we need to, one, have an injury surveillance system through the CAF so that when they come out of service, we can understand if it wasn't documented in their medical chart, which 75% of overuse injuries are reported by females, but that means 25% of the overuse injuries are not being reported. So that's a pretty substantial number. And if we have injury trends per military trade, we can assume that the likelihood of someone having a certain injury because they worked in a certain trade is pretty high. So one, I would say that we actually need to, on the CAF level, we need to identify what's going on. VAC also, the first day of basic training, a CAF member could potentially be someone who relies on VAC, right? So why don't we have that connection right away instead of waiting until they're injured or they're releasing to start building that connection? It would make a lot of sense if VAC was involved in either monitoring the injuries that are happening during service, or they could document what injuries are coming and being reported to them afterwards. And if they start noticing trends, we can start intervening on that. But again, we need to start tracking what's going on in our members and our veterans before we can start to build any solutions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now, Ms. Blenay, you have the floor for 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair. If I could come back to you, Ms. Edwards, can you explain what you mean by including female biology in training? And in that context, can you clarify what this means from both the service to CAF and then the reality of VAC?
Yes. So I am speaking about training the medical side. So our medics should receive women's health training. They are supporting our female members. They're their first line, right? Our doctors also should be receiving women's health. Or if we don't want to allocate resources to that, provide a women's health specialist. They used to have, some bases used to have a women's health nurse practitioner. They don't, a lot of them don't have that anymore. So that would be an alternative if we aren't comfortable having certain people ask those types of questions. Fine, allocate someone to do it. We don't train our leaders how to support their female members either. So they won't know how to support a female who is maybe experiencing postpartum depression when they're returning back to duty. Their leadership, they should notice when their members aren't doing well, but if they don't know the questions to ask, they won't ask. How do we support a female who is, yeah. Another aspect is REDS, which is relative energy deficit. females are at a greater risk of experiencing this. And if anyone has a daughter or have played sports, this is a common issue that's brought up in sports right now around girls and women athletes. And actually, female service members are in the same category. They're at high risk for this. This increases their risk for repetitive strain injuries, including stress fractures, which a pelvic stress fracture or a hip stress fracture, which impact females at a higher rate in basic training and throughout their career. If we're not asking the questions of, hey, is your menstrual cycle regular? That actually is too late of a question. We see that the changes in the physiology actually change before that symptom arises. To indicate REDS is possible. But irregular menstrual cycles is also a sign of a risk of increased injury.
Thank you, Miss Edwards.
And it also impacts
Mrs.
reproductive
Edwards,
health.
Thank you very much. Eh bien, voilà, c'est...
That concludes the hour that was allocated for this meeting to talk about the experience of women veterans. And I would like to say on behalf of the committee and the members of this committee to thank you for coming today. Ladies and gentlemen, today we had Ms. Chris Edwards as an individual from the Canadian War Museum, Mélanie Morin-Pelletier, and by video conference from Veterans Emergency Transition Services, Debbie Lauder, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of the organization. We will now suspend the meeting for 2 minutes in order to welcome the next witnesses and go to the next hour. Meeting suspended.
La séance.
Resuming meeting. Just looking for my notes here. Ladies and gentlemen,
Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, March 9, 2023, the committee is commencing its study on the National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan. Avant de souhaiter la bienvenue,
before welcoming our witnesses today, I would just like to say the following. Just going to give a reminder of the standing orders and the rules of this committee. With regard to routine motions, it is indicated that during the adoption of routine motions in the first meeting of the committee, the following motions have been adopted, among others, that only the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute to committee members documents, and only when these documents exist in both official languages, and that the witnesses are aware of this. In addition, that all documents presented in the framework of the committee's work that are not from a federal department, the office of the member, or the office of the clerk of the committee, or the office of the analyst, or that have not been translated by the Translation Bureau, be first revised by the Translation Bureau before being distributed to committee members. We've seen things recently. We cannot prevent people from directly sending emails to other members, but for these emails to be official, they need to be translated. And if we need to mention this information in a future report, we could therefore quote from these reports. Now, first off, I would like to commend and welcome our colleague, Mr. Paul Huss, who is here, replacing another member. I would also like to welcome the witnesses with us here tonight. We have with us, ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, PC, MP, and Minister of Veterans Affairs. We have the Honorable Pascal Saint-Onge, Member, PC, and Minister of Canadian Heritage. From the Department of Canadian Heritage, we have Isabelle Mondou, Deputy Minister. We also have Emmanuel Sajus, Assistant Deputy Minister, Sport, Major Events and Commemorations. Lastly, from the Department of Veterans Affairs, we have Paul Ledwell, a committee usual, Deputy Minister, and Amy Meunier, Assistant Deputy Minister, Commemoration and Public Affairs Branch. So I know that there will be questions, but first of all, the Minister, you have some opening remarks, and I would give the floor over to the Honorable Pascal Saint-Onge to speak for 5 minutes. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Dear colleagues, good evening. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. I appear before you today at your request to discuss the selection of the design for the National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan. My opening remarks will be much shorter than the 5 minutes you've given me, but I must say that the Department of Canadian Heritage played a strictly administrative and support role in this project. Canadian Heritage shared its expertise with Veterans Affairs Canada when it comes to the design competition, and that is why I will leave my colleague, the Minister of Veterans Affairs, to talk about the decision that led to the government making that decision. So thank you very much. Thank you, Minister. And now I would give the floor over to the Honourable Minister Petitpas-Taylor. Thank you very much, Chair. Dear members, thank you for inviting me to appear once again before the committee to discuss the National Memorial to Canada's mission in Afghanistan. From October 2001 to March 2014, Chair, Canada was involved in its most complex mission since the Korean War. More than 40,000 Canadian men and women in uniform and hundreds of civilians and government officials served in Afghanistan and the surrounding region, from the time the first ships were dispatched until the last troops returned.
158 members of our Canadian Armed Forces died in service to the mission, along with 7 Canadian civilians. Thousands more returned physically and psychologically wounded, many with permanent scars that they have to live with ever since. In 2019, Mr. Chair, our government announced that a national monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan would be designed and built at Le Breton Flats right here in Ottawa. Its purpose would be to give Canadians a permanent place to reflect on the service, the commitment and sacrifice of those who served Afghanistan and the support provided to them at home. Ancien Combattant Canada et le ministère
Veterans Affairs Canada and Canadian Heritage jointly launched a design competition in August 2019. Teams of professional artists, architects, landscape architects, and other urban design professionals were invited to submit references and examples of past projects for consideration for this monument. From the outset, it was understood that veterans, families of fallen soldiers, current military personnel, and the general public would be invited to review the finalist proposals before a design concept was chosen by an expert jury. In the end, 5 finalist teams were selected, and their design concepts were unveiled in May 2021. Canadians were then asked to choose their favorite design concepts from the 5 finalists chosen by the jury.
After 12,048 valid online surveys were analyzed, the entry from Team Stimson was found to have resonated most with respondents, receiving between 52% and 64.8% support across all questions. In other words, Mr. Chair, a preferred design concept had emerged from the online survey, at least among veterans, those who served in Canada's mission in Afghanistan, their family members, serving members, and also the public. The results were compelling, and as such, the Government of Canada decided to listen to veterans and those with a connection to the mission in Afghanistan in selecting the preferred design concept. C'est sur la base de
It was on the basis of this information, Chair, that after careful consideration, the federal government decided to select the Stimson team's design concept for the National Memorial to Canada's mission in Afghanistan. The choice was then announced at the Canadian War Museum in June 2023. We are grateful for the time and effort that all 5 teams have devoted to this important project, and we deeply appreciate and respect the work done by the jury members who reviewed the many submissions before selecting and evaluating the 5 finalists' designs. The jury's professionalism and personal experience were greatly appreciated and vital to the process. But over time, it became clear that the input of veterans and people with a connection to the mission had to be the decisive factor in choosing the design concept.
And members of the committee, as we approach Veterans Week and Remembrance Day next month, Canadians will soon be reflecting on what so many have given up in the name of peace, freedom, human rights, and democracy in the world. In Afghanistan, our troops suffered devastating losses of life, debilitating physical and psychological injuries.
We owe these veterans a debt we can never fully repay. Therefore, choosing the design that best matches the monument that veterans and people who played a role in the Afghanistan mission want was the least we could do. It is an excellent way to express our gratitude for their service. Once again, thank you for inviting me, and we look forward to answering your questions. Thank you very much, Minister. And in both cases, you did not use all of your time, so this will allow committee members to ask more questions. And I would also invite committee members to look at the time they have. You know, you don't always look at it, and you look at me for giving the time check. I would also say to Ms. Petipa-Taylor to maybe slow down a bit to help interpreters. You speak very quickly. So on that note, We are going to proceed like there was in the like last meeting happened. There were lovely exchanges without interruptions. So I would open up the floor for the first round of questions. 6 minutes. Mr. Polhus, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Hello, Minister. Sir. First off, Minister, we are here to talk about the process. We believe that the process was completely I don't think it was a terrible process. I think it was done well by the jury, and there was the professional team that did very well, and they selected Équipe Daou from Quebec. There was an artist from Quebec in the region that I represent. But now the big surprise that we have is that there was an arbitrary decision, according to us, from the part of the government to change teams and to use Stimson instead. We are trying to understand this. The community, rather the business design community internationally does not understand how a jury process was completely ignored. You are the Minister of Veterans Affairs. I know Veterans Affairs. I don't need the morale. I don't need you to give me any lessons today. I just want to understand the decision process. Léger did a study, and there was a survey. I compared surveys. These are professional statistics, and they cannot be used to inform a decision like this. This is not the same thing as a professional jury that is doing its work. So, on that note, I would just like to say, Minister Saint-Onge, you said Canadian Heritage, we have nothing to do with this. We're only playing an administrative role. I would like to remind you that Minister Rodriguez, your predecessor, who was minister at the time at the start of 2023, received a memo from the deputy minister, the assistant deputy minister rather, saying that his authorization was needed in order to proceed to a change. I don't have the memo in front of me. It's obviously a lot of it is blacked out, but there was a certain role played by Heritage. You know, in Heritage, you are responsible of all the artists and design work for this monument, and you can't just brush this off. Don't you have an opinion on how this went down? Listen, as you said, the competent minister in this case is the Minister of Canadian Heritage. They followed the government's recommendation to respect Veterans Affairs. That inaudible. The consultation that was done with Veterans Affairs and to respect the preferences. My predecessor simply reinforce the government's decision. But my question here is how, as minister today, see the work of the jury, and it has been completely ignored. The survey was considered and studied by the team. They chose Équipe Daou, the Daou team from Montreal, and so at a memo of February 15, Minister Rodriguez said, no problem, we'll choose another team. Why? That is what I want to know. We want to know why the other team was chosen, whereas everything was done according to a procedure. The decision that was taken was very well explained by my colleague, the Minister of Veterans Affairs, in her opening remarks. She properly explained that the government consulted with families of veterans, with people who participated on behalf of Canada in the mission in Afghanistan, and that the government made the decision of respecting their preferences. So a survey, like Léger determined, has no scientific value. What you're basically saying is that anybody could have voted in that survey, and you say that that data is reliable enough to completely reject the work of a professional jury. That jury chose the work of Daou. At the end of the day, the department chose, information that's not reliable at all. We want to know why. It's not just a survey that has no scientific value. You may go, yes. First of all, I think we need to be very clear here. We spoke of surveys, questionnaires, and consultations. We never said it was a scientific survey, first and foremost. The reason for this is that we wanted to hear from veterans. This is a monument to commemorate veterans' mission in Afghanistan. Veterans Affairs Canada are the project lead here. We sent messages to veterans who have access to my VAC account, and we wanted to ensure that veterans were aware of the consultation. Second, we sent messages to the families of fallen soldiers in Afghanistan. We also sent messages to all people who work with veterans like Canadian Legion, etc., to ensure that these messages came through. Then we were very surprised. The 12,000 Canadians answered the survey. Minister, I don't know if you saw the report by Léger, which is the largest surveying company in Canada. He said that these surveys are not scientific and do not represent the opinions of serving members. These results of these surveys cannot be considered as part of an objective choice for the decision of the monument. But inaudible, you still have a professional jury that was completely ignored. And you used a survey that you say represented veterans. And I looked at the data, and Léger did it as well. First of all, Mr. Paulus, Mr. Chair, rather, we had 5 finalists. We did not ignore the jury. We listened to veterans, and that is why we chose this project. Dowd said that inaudible. Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Paulus. And now we will go to Mr. Sean Casey for the next 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, ministers and your teams. I will be asking all my questions to Minister Petipa-Taylor. And I wanted to start with the process. I want to do this so that we can better understand why we're here today. From what I understand of what you said, there is a jury. The jury selected a winner among the 5 submissions. But there was a consultation that was the initiative of the department, and veterans chose another concept. I understand that Mr. Paulus has voiced criticism, and Mr. Desilets has as well, with regard to these consultations. I believe, as the Standing Committee of Veterans Affairs, we are here to move forward on files that are important to veterans. There's no doubt that you share this role as well. There is a great deal of criticism from the members from Quebec. What I would like to understand is the following. Why was the jury's point of view considered and less so that of veterans? Maybe you could help me understand that. And could you talk about the results of the consultation that you led within the department? If we only look at the respondents from Quebec, what did they think about it? Thank you, Mr. Casey, for that question. First of all, I think that we need to recognize that VAC, when we planned for this monument, it's perfectly normal to have a jury to do that work. However, we need to ensure as the project lead that there will be a consultation process. We need to ensure that there was a questionnaire, a consultation, but we wanted to hear from veterans as such. The jury was selected, and we thank them for their work. They worked very hard. There were 25 people who presented different concepts of models, and the jury did very hard work to cut that down to 5 finalists, and then they presented the 5 finalists to us. Afterward, we started the consultation process. And we wanted to ensure that we not only heard from veterans, but from Canadians from coast to coast to coast. We also wanted to ensure that veterans would be properly represented, in addition to the family members of people who served in Afghanistan. So VAC sent messages through my VAC account, and as a committee member, I'm sure you're well aware of that. This was to ensure that people were aware of the survey. We also communicated with people, the families of fallen soldiers, and we sent a message to various people who work with veterans to ensure that these messages were sent and read. And we were surprised. Like I said, we had twice the number of respondents. The survey results were results. The survey and the jury in the process is the usual process. What was unusual here is that there was a jury and a survey, and these did not have this. These were not pointing in the same direction. 50 to 62% of the survey expressed support for Stimson's concept. The second place, Daou, received 23 to 40% support in the survey. With regard to your question regarding Quebec, I must say that the vast majority of people who answered the survey from Quebec supported the Stimson concept. Veterans said that the Stimson concept was a better representation of veterans' loss, bravery, and sacrifice, and also the family. That, for me, as Minister of Veterans Affairs, was very important. It was very important for me to ensure that veterans were supported in this direction. If we wish to have a commemorative monument that commemorates Canada's mission in Afghanistan, we need to ensure that this monument properly reflects what veterans have told us. That is why we supported this decision. As Minister of Veterans Affairs, I must say that I fully acknowledge that I made the decision of listening to our veterans, and that is what we did, and that is why we did it. Thank you, Minister. I have less than 20 seconds left. That's probably not enough for another answer, but, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Casey. And next up, we will be going to Mr. Luc Desilets for the 6 next minutes. Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to say good evening to our guests here tonight. Thank you for being here. Minister Saint-Onge, you are minimizing your role in all this. You are responsible, in a way. You selected the experts that constituted this jury panel. You had an influence and a role to play in this survey. Let's start off with that. Ms. Saint-Onge, do you recognize that your department asked for a legal opinion from the Department of Justice to remove Daou from consideration? Thank you, colleague. First of all, I'd like to remind the committee that this was a joint process. We were there to support the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'll let the Deputy Minister answer the next part of your question. Quickly, please. Yes, thank you, Chair. In all of our projects, we seek out legal opinions. This is something that is perfectly normal. I didn't see the legal opinion, no. In a document by your department, we read that the departments of Canadian Heritage would be directly contacting Daou in order to go to the next step of the design and the implementation and building of the monument. Veterans Affairs and Canadian Heritage contacted Daou to tell them what the decision was. Yes, but what we're reading here is that it was to go to the next step. It was even to go to the building of it, of this monument, yes. Ms. Saint-Onge, once more, if ministers were only supposed to be informed of the choice of the jury and not fully responsible for that decision. Shouldn't we conclude that it's the Prime Minister's office? No, Ms. Saint-Onge. This was a decision that was supported by the government. What is the government? Is that your department or is it the PMO? I said it last week, Mr. Desilets. The government uses the recommendation from VAC. Ms. Saint-Onge, are you able to confirm that there is no mention, nor in the contract for jury members, nor in the contest rules, that the questionnaire was worth more at the end of the day than the expert jury panel's opinion? I don't have that information. Is it written somewhere? Maybe my colleague can chime in. There are many things that motivate the decision of the jury. There are questions of representation, of vision. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's just not my question. Is it written somewhere? Is it written somewhere that the survey supersedes the opinion of an expert jury? Yes or no? Mr. Desilets, as Minister of Veteran Affairs, I wanted to ensure that we heard from veterans. I thought that was primal. This was the decisive factor. Most Canadians said that they support the process. Listen, I don't even agree with that. We have a veteran here in the room that wrote a letter, and you could have read that, and he does not support this project. He doesn't even know if he was recognized as a veteran in the survey. That said, I have the floor, Minister. Why do you think that this was never done? Let's talk about the survey. The survey takes 90 seconds in someone's life. It is anonymous. Are you able to say, Minister Petitpas-Taylor, how many women answered the survey? No. Perfect. We can't know that either. We can't know if there is even one woman who answered this survey. Are you, Ms. Petitpas-Taylor, able to tell me how many hours, well, rather the 300 to 400 hours that the jury spent doing their work, that time spent, can you truly tell me that that time is worth less than a survey? My answer here is that I think we need to recognize the jury's exceptional work. You did not respect that jury's exceptional work. Ms. Desilets, would you allow the minister to answer? I said that there were 25 design concepts presented to the jury and that the jury had shortened that list down to 5. We absolutely appreciate the work done by this jury. I think that Mr. Desilets is saying that he said certain things. For me, I believe that we need to support veterans. That is the least we can do, specifically when we talk about a monument that commemorates their sacrifice. Minister, you know, like me, we work for veterans. We respect veterans. Veterans are not the problem here. It's the process that you implemented and that you are not following, Indeed, it looks like your government is suffering from a barrage of criticism here, and that's not just the committee saying that. There are a whole bunch of organizations. So 300 organizations and individuals support DAO. That's not an anonymous survey here. Mr. Desilets, once more, I fully acknowledge that the decision to listening to our veterans returns to me, and I fully support it. Thank you for your speeches.
Blenny, for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you so much, Chair. And as always, all my questions go through the Chair. I guess my first question is, I did read the proposal package as a person who ran a nonprofit for many years. I'm very well versed with these. I didn't see anything in here about the process that was going to happen in terms of consultation through an online survey. It actually says in here the jury will have overall responsibility for selecting the winning design based on the combined scores of the jury and technical committee evaluations. So I'm just asking for clarity. Was there anything in here that I somehow missed? And if there isn't anything in this proposal process that was outlined for all the people who submitted, how was that decided upon, that there would be an online survey?
Thank you so much for that question, Ms. Blaney. I wasn't there during that process, so I'm going to turn to my officials so perhaps they could provide you with a bit of the details regarding the process.
If I could, Mr. Chair, what I'd say in response is the context of the engagement around the monument. Right from the outset, the announcement of the monument was to consult with, to engage veterans to get their perspective. First, there was a visioning exercise in 2014 about what the monument should represent. There was engagement around the location of the monument with the views of veterans winning the day and the choice being to place it at LeBreton Flats. There was views about an engagement around what themes should underline the monument, all of which was fed into to those who were coming forward to apply for this and to put forward submissions. So right from the outset, the engagement with veterans and the understanding of the importance of the perspective of veterans, especially those who served in Afghanistan, both in uniform and in civil society, was paramount.
So my next question then is, I understand there was an online survey and I see the results of the online survey. I'm wondering, how was information verified? So I heard earlier the minister talking about places where the survey was advertised to ask people to participate, but how was their information verified? How do we know that these were actually Afghan veterans, Afghan service people who were from the civilian side, and folks that were related to Afghan veterans? How was that verified through the process? Because what I'm hearing through the chair, of course, is that it represents Afghan veterans' opinion. I'm just not clear on how that was verified so that we know that, in fact, that is what we're looking at right now.
So the individuals who responded were asked to self-identify and indicate their representation, their history, and their connection. All of those that were connected through the department, as the ministers indicated, were through networks that we already have established with veterans. And they were invited to come forward. It was very, very important to hear from the veteran community about this. They were asked to self-identify and to indicate that. It's our experience that veterans seldom misrepresent their service, and they're very, very faithful about that representation.
Well, I have absolute faith in veterans. I don't know if I have the same faith in every other person in the world, but I do have faith in the veterans. So when you say that they were self-identifying, what does that mean? Was there a section in the survey where they just said, this is who I am? Was there any link to people being able to identify so that it could be verified on the other end?
And I'll ask my colleague Amy to address that.
Thank you. They had an option to choose from whether they were a veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces, a family member of someone who participated in the Afghanistan mission, an individual who participated in the Afghanistan mission, a member of the police. So they had some options to choose from, one of those selections. And I did not undertake the survey myself, but it was self-reporting, as the deputy mentioned.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that answer. So I'm also very curious about how the jury was included in this, because, I mean, sadly, this does seem very confusing. And I've heard again and again that this was a political decision, and that really is heartbreaking to me. You know, we're doing our study on women veterans. We're hearing about how utterly invisible they feel. I think that their experience is one that should concern us all. And I would hate to be doing to Afghan veterans what has been done for so long to women veterans. So I'm just, if you could explain why it wasn't in the proposal outline that this was going to be included, and was the jury aware of this consultation process, and how were they included in deciding the best way to get the information?
Again, not having been there during the process of all of this, myself and my colleague are 3 months here, and of course it's our responsibility to make sure that we can answer your questions. I'm going to still, however, pass it on to my deputy, as I'm not the process per se. I want to make sure that we get that right. But the only comment that I am going to make, making sure that we listen to the opinions of the majority of the veterans that have answered this survey, to me, was a top priority. Minister McCauley was here at the time, but again, I really stand by the decision that was made by Minister McCauley. I think that you can't go wrong when you're listening to the veterans, the opinions of the veterans. And when individuals tell me that when they see the concept that was designed, that was selected, that for them it represents the sacrifice, the loss of the mission, says a lot. And that is really why we chose this concept as opposed to le concept d'AO. But Paul, if you wanted to perhaps...
Sorry, je m'excuse, Madame Meunier, il y a plus de temps, donc peut-être...
Excuse me, there's no more time. Maybe at the next round, we will be having a second round of questions for a total of 25 minutes. So maybe at that point, Ms. Meunier, you can finish your answer. And I would... invite Mr. Blake Richards for the 5 next minutes. You have the floor.
Has construction on the Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan started?
No, it has not.
It hasn't started, okay. Do we have any idea when the monument will be completed?
I'm going to pass that off to my deputy, but I can tell you that the contract was signed with the national... the NCC. That was signed. So again, work will certainly be underway very soon.
Okay, can you just give me a completion date? That's all I'm asking for.
The current tentative timeline would be in 2027 for an unveiling.
2027, okay. So it took this government 8 years to announce a design. There's nothing been built, like nothing. 8 years to announce a design. And then when the design comes out, it's been bungled so badly that it's absolutely mired in controversy at this point. Who knows? Maybe it'll even end up in court, which will further hold this thing up. I'm actually wondering at this point, at the rate that this government's moving, whether any of the Afghanistan veterans will still be with us to see the monument when it actually gets built. That's how bad this is at this point. So I guess my only question is this. What do you have to say to the more than 40,000 Canadians who served as part of this mission? What do you have to say to the families of the 158 Canadians who gave their lives in Afghanistan about how badly this has been handled and how badly you've just honored the memory of those 158 Canadians? What do you have to say to them?
Well, Mr. Richards, first and foremost, I think when this process first started, we can't forget that your government had chosen a location that really was not convenient to the veterans at the time. They really complained and indicated they didn't want that location to be the location of choice. And when we formed government, we changed the location, and that's why
this is what you're going to say to the families of the 158 Canadians who have given their lives for this country, and you're talking 8 years. We only have a design and there's no construction at all, and it's mired in so much controversy, and that's what you have to say to those families?
I'm answering your question, actually, Mr. Richards, and then from there, we'll continue on by indicating that my message to the veterans and to the family members that have lost loved ones, we are listening to veterans, and we want to make sure that we get this right. And that is why that we are moving forward with the concepts, the Stimson concept, because veterans have told us across the country that that concept represents best the sacrifice, their loss, and also their families' involvement with respect to their day-to-day life. I will always be ensuring that I respect that decision that has been made, and again, listening to veterans is what I will do as the Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Well, I certainly hope we'll see some action soon. I'll turn the rest of my time to Mr. Paulus.
Il vous reste...
You have 2 minutes, Mr. Paulus. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Saint-Onge. On the morning of June 19, 2023, when the design was unveiled and announced, just 1 hour before that, by video conference, the department was speaking with Daou, saying, congratulations, you were chosen, but unfortunately you're not the one who's being chosen. And in the same conference, it was said that Daou would be compensated for the losses they would incur as part of this process. Can you say how much was given? Just to correct course here, I would just like to say that it was Veterans Affairs that spoke with Daou, not Canadian Heritage. Okay, Ms. Petitpas-Taylor. Once again, I will be handing the floor over to my Deputy Minister because I was not Minister at the time. Yes, it is true. It was the same day the announcement was made. All other four other finalists were contacted, and we told Daou that we were open to talking compensation. There was a 10% number on the table. This is a normal figure, and this issue was raised. There was additional talks with the team. At numerous regards, we said that we were there for them, and we were expecting an answer. Ms. Saint-Onge, just one more question. The Légier's assessment of the survey has completely demolished your survey's validity. Do you believe that this survey is worth something? Léger says it's worth nothing. Do you think the survey was worth completely scrapping a process that is super important, that includes a jury and a very legitimate process? Should this have happened? As my colleague, the Minister, said, we never referred to a survey. There was a consultation with veterans and the family members of veterans. Mr. Paulus, look at me every now and then just to ensure that you know how much time you have left. And now I'll give the floor over to Mr. Soray, Randip Soray.
Thank you. I'm just going to have Mr. Casey finish off a question, then I'll go back to myself for the rest of the time.
Okay. Mr. Casey.
Merci, Monsieur Soray. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Soray. Thank you, Chair. Minister Petitpas-Taylor, during that meeting, you were very clear. You said that your concern was the perspectives of veterans. Most of the questions that you heard from were with regard to the process. You were here 12 years ago on October 19. My honorable colleague from the Bloc, Mr. Desilets, for whom I have a lot of respect, said the following, and I quote, this isn't a veterans issue according to me. Can you clarify that? Mr. Casey, I am really confused that, and rather I think it's curious that members of the committee are questioning the opinion of veterans. We spoke a lot of surveys today, of whether these surveys are scientific or not. But I'd just like to say that whether a survey is scientific or not, we heard from 12,000 Canadians that answered the survey, and the vast majority of these people were veterans, and the vast majority have told us that the Stimson concept for them better represented the bravery of soldiers, the sacrifice, and their contribution to the mission. I am shocked that we are questioning veterans and that we are calling them into question. We are creating a monument for them, and for us, we need to ensure that we are listening to them. As I said previously, it's quite shocking that 12,000 people answered a survey. That means that a good number of people were interested in sharing their opinions. As a Minister of Veterans Affairs, listening to them is my utmost priority.
Casey, and thank you, Minister. I've been listening and hearing a lot about this consultation and the survey, and maybe and commemoration is a big component of veterans. It's one of the pillars of veterans to commemorate the sacrifice that veterans have done. So in this consultation, what I heard from Mr. Ledwell as well is that you consulted using groups and contacts that are already available to you that are veterans, veterans' families, people that have have taken veteran services. Would that be something that's readily available, say, to Leger? Leger would not be able to get that because we've actually heard testimony before to connect with veterans and getting lists to actual veterans is not that easy. And now we have them in veterans and more contact points. So how would a consultation with veterans in the manner that was done by Veterans Affairs differ from a random poll or survey that somebody like Leger that would not have specific data of actual veterans in Canada be?
I'll give a part of the answer, then from there perhaps I'll turn it over to my deputy minister. But again, we wanted to make sure that the information got out to veterans, and that is why that we use the MyVac account, and there's a link there to make sure that the message got out to the veterans in question, to make sure that they were aware that this questionnaire, survey, consultation was going to be going on because we wanted to hear from them. We also made sure that members that lost loved ones during the mission were also notified, but also making sure that stakeholders that work with veterans day in and day out were also made aware of the survey. It's the best way to make sure that we can get the information to folks, and I think when we look at the results that we've had over 12,000 people respond to the survey, I think we saw that it was an effective way to reach veterans. I don't know if, Paul, if you have anything else to add.
I would just add, if I could, Mr. Chair, that the sampling and the oversampling, perhaps, of veterans and those who served as part of the mission in Afghanistan was very much an objective in this. It's not to have a representative sample of all Canadians. It's really to get that sample and that perspective from veterans and others who served in Afghanistan. And of the greater than 12,048 respondents, there were greater than 3,000 of those respondents who were directly part of the mission to Afghanistan. It was critically important to hear from them.
And if I can just add as well, we still heard from 12,000 Canadians. So just because it wasn't a scientific survey, it doesn't mean that it's not valid. We certainly still heard the opinions of 12,000 Canadians.
But I want to make sure all veterans that are in the VAC system were given the opportunity to respond to the survey. The 158 people who sacrificed their lives in Afghanistan, their families were connected with this, and those that suffered casualties as well. So virtually every single person that was involved with that mission or broadly in the Veterans Affairs had the opportunity to participate, plus everyone else. Am I correct?
That is correct, and I would say two things in that regard, if I could, Mr. Chair. One, that when the monument was announced in 2014, there were many, many families of the fallen who were there for that announcement, and were extremely touched. And I wasn't there, but I've heard and I've spoken to Afghan veterans who were there that evening, and the impact on them because of the family members who were there was tremendous. In June, when we announced the design, there were also family members who had lost brothers and sons and daughters.
Thank you, Mr. Ledouard. Thank you so much. Et maintenant, nous allons passer à...
Now we're going to go to two short 2-minute 30 interventions. First off, Mr. Desilets, you have the floor for the first 2.5 minutes. Proceed. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Petitpetiter, related to your last intervention that was where you mentioned me, I would say that you are never wrong when you listen to veterans, but you can be wrong when you use veterans, and you have used veterans in the case of this survey. It is possible to be wrong. That's all I'd like to say. Now, question for you, Ms. Petitpetiter. You alluded earlier in your earlier appearance that there was a decision to decide at the end of the day who made this decision. Once again, the decision was made by the Government of Canada under the with the recommendation of the Veterans Affairs Canada. Was the PMO informed of anything as throughout the process? Once again, the decision was made by the federal government. The recommendation, Mr. Desilets, came from my department, the Department of Veterans Affairs. The recommendation is from VAC. The recommendation is from VAC. You were the one who suggested that It was your predecessor. My predecessor made this decision of supporting Stimson because, once again, the vast majority of survey respondents and the questionnaire supported the Stimson concept. The PMO was never made aware in the process, once again. I cannot say. Maybe they were aware of it, but they weren't the one who made the decision. It was the Department of Veterans Affairs that made this recommendation, and then the government made the decision. Did they ask questions throughout the process? Did the PMO ask any questions throughout the course of the process? Once again, I was not there. I was not the minister at that time. I don't know if my colleague can add. In my memory, no, they did not ask questions directly. You know, what I find a bit troubling here is the following. I still think that you are not taking veterans into account and saying that you are using them for a garbage survey to, if I'm talking about the question that was asked earlier, only 12% of Quebecers responded to the survey. Quebec doesn't represent 12% of the population. This is in 40 to 50% of people of the survey were in the National Capital Region, which doesn't represent anything whatsoever. Thank you, Mr. Desilets. 15 seconds if you want to react maybe to Mr. Desilets' question. If not, we will go on to Ms. Blaney, who will have 2.5 minutes for her intervention. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm scared to touch the. Thank you. Sorry, I was waiting for the light to come on. So I guess my last question really circles around this idea of nothing about us without us, which is something that I really try to practice in the work that I do. So I understand that there was an open public survey that people were able to tell you who they are, self-identify who they are. But it wasn't something specifically for Afghan veterans and their loved ones. And that's where my concern is, because we're hoping here that that representation was there, but we don't know for sure. And so I guess my question is basically, why was there not an investment in a survey that would outreach specifically? You know, we've heard testimony today that you had information, information was put on the MyVac accounts. I can tell you, I know a lot of veterans who would never look at their MyVac account because of other issues. So I'm just wondering, was it too expensive in the perspective of the department to actually hire an organization that would call to those folks, reach out to them, find ways to identify, connect with them, and ask their opinion, so that what we would know then is that those veterans were represented, that their voices were heard. This system, I really appreciate the self-identifying, but it doesn't actually meet the need that I have. And this is nothing personal. I have no opinion. I'm not an Afghan veteran, and I am not a person who lost somebody. But it worries me that the outreach, and this seems to be an issue with VAC, where all too often the way that veterans are consulted is a sort of general online process, but that doesn't actually connect directly with veterans where they are to find out how things can be done better. So I'm just wondering, was it an issue of money? Why was it not looked at to have something more specific?
You have 30 seconds.
If I could, Mr. Chair, the real objective was to try to hear from as many veterans as possible, and as many veterans who are attached to the Afghan mission as possible. So it wasn't a question of money. It was a question of reach and getting the message out and the response out and back from as many as possible. As I indicated earlier, right from the outset in the announcement of the monument, the engagement with the veteran community was consistent. It was regular. There was great awareness amongst those who had served in Afghanistan. And when we reach out, there would be general awareness.
Thank you.
That doesn't mean that everyone will respond, but we had a tremendous response, greater than 3,000.
Thank you, Mr. Redwell. Et là, il nous reste.
Now we have 2 interventions of 5 minutes each. These are the 2 final interventions. I would open the floor up to Mr. Pierre Paulus for the first 5 minutes. You may go. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Petipa-Taylor, I sent you a letter. You responded on October 18th. I have questions on the letter that you responded on October 18th. These are questions on the process. And in one of the paragraphs, you said that as promoters of the project, we felt the need to reflect public opinion. You felt the need. What does that mean to you? What does that mean? To feel the need. I think that feel the need means the following. When we have a survey where 50% of people supported one concept, I really felt the need to respect the survey results. The project was handed over to Dow in between November 21 and May 2023, when Minister Rodriguez signed off and on the change of project. What happened in that timeline? What kind of pressure was made? There was a survey. Nobody thinks it's actually valid here. What kind of changes were made in that period? Once again, I was not minister at the time. Yes, minister, but you are taking the reins here of the department. You should know by being here what happened. Or maybe Ms. Saint-Onge could answer. Nobody's aware of anything. There was no outward pressure. There was no pressure from anyone outside that was exerted for this decision today. I wanted to make sure that we listened to our veterans. The decision was taken. The jury had made its decision. Dow was chosen, and this was a done deal in November 2021. But what happened between 2021 and 2023? What happened? What happened during that timeline? Ms. Saint-Onge, you were in charge of this contest. What happened? The jury made a decision. Who is stepping in here to influence when there was a decision in 2023 and when Minister Rodriguez handed down the decision? You know, this must be how these departments work, no? The Department of Veterans Affairs, as I said, was the project lead. We were the leaders to ensure that we could complete the monument. Mr. Paulus, we heard from veterans. They clearly told us that the Stimson design better represented the mission. This discussion with veterans is one that you mentioned. The survey is pseudoscientific, and it was all, the jury was aware of the information in the survey. The decision had already been made. What happened afterward? Why is it that at the start of 2023 there was a memo? Who talked to whom? Who said that these changes needed to be made? Was there pressure from other organizations? Some people must have known what happened to point this change. I don't have any information, Minister. My Deputy Minister will talk. There was some studies that were done. The situation in Afghanistan changed a lot. This was a way to ask ourselves a question: how do we commemorate the sacrifice of Canadians? And that this would help in this direction. There was a process. There was all kind of technical considerations. There were professionals who worked on it. And in 2021, people internally said, that's not ideal, and that other measures should be taken, another process should be followed. Nobody arrived. There was no pressure from outside, according to you. There were no organizations because nobody knew nobody could have known what the choice was. We know that the people who served in Afghanistan were highly impacted by the situation. I know that because they didn't know that the decision was taken. We heard that from veterans that were part of the process, that were involved at that point. We put a greater premium on the analysis in these studies. Thank you for your interventions. And the last speaker will be Mr. Brian May for the 5 final minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, ministers, for being with us today. I will have to just sort of go on a bit of a tangent here for a moment, because in preparation for today and reading some of the background information, I was reflecting on my time, Mr. Chair, in that fantastic chair over there, and the studies that were done on commemoration and some of the work that was done. And I would be remiss if I didn't take advantage of this opportunity to remind this committee and remind Canadians of the amazing work that's already being done by dozens, if not hundreds, of artists across Canada commemorating Canadians during the Afghan War. And one of those amazing people, amazing artists, was a gentleman by the name of David Sofa, who unfortunately passed away not that long ago. And David is a member in my riding, a constituent in my riding. And he took it upon himself to create an organization called the Portraits of Honor. If you've not heard of it, look it up. It's an amazing organization, nonprofit organization, commemorating fallen soldiers. And specifically, the cornerstone of that organization was a painting that he created, 40 feet long, 10 feet high, commemorating all 158 fallen soldiers in the Afghan War. And David taught me a lot about commemoration and the importance of communicating with those soldiers, and in this case, the families of the soldiers. And he spoke at length to Afghan vets to get a sense of what they wanted to see and how to best commemorate them. And I think it's incredibly important for us to learn from that and to celebrate the courage and sacrifice and the loss of those who fought valiantly during the mission in Afghanistan. And quite frankly, it's important to support them as well. And I'm wondering, Minister, if you can tell us, what was done to help them transition into civilian life, and what programs are available to them today.
Well, thanks so much, Mr. May. First and foremost, I think it's really important and very timely that we thank all of our veterans, those that are the serving members, and also our veterans that were approaching Remembrance Day. And it's the work that they've done in this mission and other missions, is really exemplary, and for that we thank them. With respect to the Afghan veterans, some that are still serving and some that are exiting, it's truly important to make sure that as a federal government that we continue to support them in their time of need. We certainly recognize that many Afghan veterans have suffered physical injuries and also psychological injuries, and they have to live with that. So as a government, it's truly important to make sure that we ensure that the services are in place to make sure that they get the services when they need them in a timely fashion. As the Department of Veterans Affairs, we continue to work hand in hand with those veterans in order to make sure that we meet their needs. I know that I personally have several nephews that have served in the Afghan mission, and I have seen the toll that the mission has taken on them personally as well, and also on their families. And as such, it's really important to make sure that we're there for them in their time of need. And as the Minister for Veterans Affairs, it's a portfolio that I take very personally, and I certainly want to do all that we can to make sure that we support our veterans now and in the future.
Thank you, Minister. On the specific aspect of this memorial, I know, and I've talked to veterans who are impatient. They want this built. I think you talked a little bit about the process today. You were asked about deadlines, but I'm wondering maybe if you can update us on where we're at with this process and what does that look like moving forward and what big hurdles do we still need to overcome?
Well, first and foremost, thanks again for that question. I think that having worked and met with veterans over the past 3 months, when the issue of the Afghan monument comes it becomes an area that I'm questioned on. Oftentimes, I'm hearing people are very anxious and they want to see this done sooner rather than later. People are concerned that there's going to be delays. I'm pleased to report that the National Capital Commission we've signed the contract, so that hurdle is done. So now we need to start making sure that the construction can start in a very timely fashion. As I've indicated, there was a bit of delays in the past with respect to the location where the monument was going to be selected. When we formed government, we made sure that we found an appropriate location for the monument. And then from there, we've gone through this process. Now the next step will be to make sure that we have the individuals that are going to build the monument in place. Just the Stimson company, of course, developed the design, but they are not the ones that are going to be building the monument per se. So that's the next phase of the work that needs to be done.
Thank you. That's all the time that we have. And thank you, all of you, for the testimony. It was great. And I have to inform the members of the committee that this week we're going to have our training on trauma. And next week we plan to come back with the monument for an hour. And we're going to invite, we're going to have 1 hour on women's veterans. But for that meeting, the clerk said, we're not going to invite women's veterans. We're going to invite researchers and academics, at the same time because we know how special it is when we have women's veterans testifying here. So that's what we are planning to do. And alors, permettez-moi de remercier.
Allow me to thank all witnesses that were with us here tonight.
Of Commons, Honorable Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, Minister of Veterans Affairs, Honorable Pascal Saint-Onge, Minister of Canadian Heritage, witnesses, Department of Canadian Heritage, Mrs. Isabelle Mondou, Deputy Minister, and Mrs. Emmanuelle Sajos, Assistant Deputy Minister, Sport, Major Events and Commemorations. And from the Department of Veterans Affairs, Mr. Paul Ledwell, Deputy Minister, and Mrs. Amy Meunier, Assistant Deputy Minister, Commemoration and Public Affairs Branch. Et sur ce, je veux remercier.
And on that note, I'd like to thank all the team, the technical team, and I would ask all committee members, do we have consent to adjourn? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.